About Joseph. And Joseph, I love reading about him. He's just such a great character, a great example in so many different ways. We'll start reading in verse 1. It says, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he had, or all that he did, to prosper in his hand." Notice what we're seeing with Joseph now is the same thing that we saw with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that's just that blessing of God on his life. How God's hand was just on whatever these guys did, everything they touched, it just turned to gold. Remember how Laban, he said, I know that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Everything that Jacob did, God was blessing, it was just blessing. He was prospering him. And this was because they were a special people, a chosen people, and God wanted to show himself strong in their life. And so we see Joseph here, he's really the only godly son of Jacob, and God's just blessing everything that he touches. And Potiphar, he's looking at Joseph and how everything he handles is just done well, it is blessed, and he just puts full trust in Joseph, and he puts him over everything. And because everything Joseph touched, it prospered. And so in verse 4, it says, "And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over the house and all that he had put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field." Now, a while back, some of the guys will remember this during men's leadership training. I went through this passage and we talked a lot about Joseph and used him as an example of a pastor, because a pastor or a bishop is an overseer. And there's some really good principles, and this isn't all I'm going to preach about, but I do want to briefly touch on this, that a pastor is an overseer, and Joseph, he was an overseer of this house. Now notice that Joseph, even though he is an overseer, was Joseph the real boss? No, he wasn't. Potiphar was the real boss, okay? Now, when it comes to the church, who's the real boss? The Lord's the real boss, isn't he? The Lord is the chief shepherd, okay? And the pastor is just an under shepherd. He's an overseer that has been put over the church, and, there's accountability to that. I even believe, earthly speaking, I'm accountable to the congregation, because as an overseer, I'm trusted with a lot. And this is why it is wicked when pastors betray trust, and when pastors are doing wicked things, when they're crooked with the money and things like that. We're an overseer. And you know what? As a church member, you shouldn't have to just be looking at everything I do under a microscope. You don't want to do that. You should be able to have a pastor that you can trust, and that's how a good overseer is. And Joseph was such a good overseer that Potiphar, he didn't even really know what was going on except for the bread that he ate. He just knew, hey, things are going good. My house is prospering. My wealth is growing. I'm eating good. My servants are happy. And it's all thanks to Joseph. And so Joseph, he was able to just kind of do what he wanted. And, if a pastor is doing a good job, the people in the church aren't going to have to worry about it all the time. They're not going to have to obsess over these things. And often it happens where things are going bad in a church. And all of a sudden people start wondering, hey, what's going on? That's usually, when people start asking a lot of questions about money, when they're struggling to pay the bills. When the pastor has to get up every Sunday and preach on tithing, that's when people start saying, well, okay, if it's that bad, why is it bad? What are we spending the money on? How much is coming in? But the truth is, when a church is doing well, when a pastor is doing a good job, they're not usually that worried about it. And that's how it was in Potiphar's house. He wasn't, looking at Joseph under a microscope. He just knew it was prospering. He was doing good. But at the end of the day, that house, those possessions, they were not Joseph's. And this church, it is not my church. The money is not my money. The building is not my building. I am just an overseer, and I do believe I'm accountable. And I do believe, a church has the right and should be able to remove a pastor if he's a bad overseer. I believe that with all my heart, and that's another subject for another day. But no, so notice in verse 6, it says, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. He knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So Potiphar, he completely trusts Joseph with everything. Said to the point, he's not even paying attention. He's not even checking up with him. He's not making Joseph, file reports and things. He can just see that everything is going well. That's how prosperous Joseph was. Potiphar sees that things are going better now than they ever have since Joseph is here. That's the way we ought to be in the workplace. You ought to be the kind of worker that your boss doesn't have to look over your shoulder all the time. You ought to be the kind of worker where you do such a good job, you don't have to tell the boss that you're doing a good job. The guy in your company that's always talking about how he's the backbone of the company and how he holds the place together, usually is not the backbone of the company, is not holding the place together. Anybody ever worked with somebody like that? This place is going to fall apart if I quit. They're always mad about something, and they're always ready to quit just to teach that company a lesson. And what they never know is that most people are thinking, please quit. Please do. You're a pain in the neck. You're a liability. But a person who is actually valuable to their company, they are going to be loved by their boss. If your boss hates you, there's probably a reason for it. You might have some profit, but you're not worth it. And so he's going to have a problem with, he's going to have a problem with you. And so if you have to talk about these things, it's probably because you're not all that you think you are. But when it came to Potiphar, he trusted Joseph. And he didn't have to check up on him. And that's the way we ought to strive to be that way. And you ought to have that kind of reputation. When I worked at the distribution center in Spring Valley, I remember one time a guy that I worked with who had a reputation for just having conflicts with people all the time. He was always having conflicts with people. And one day he decided to have a conflict with me. And what this guy would typically do, he would just badger people. He would bother them. And then he'd get people upset. And this guy had one of the filthiest mouths you ever heard. And they had a no swear policy there at the time that they didn't really follow closely. But if people made a stink about it, all of a sudden they would do something about it. So what he would do, he would badger people until they would cuss at him. And then he'd go tattle on them. And one day he decided to badger me. Okay, now I don't cuss. Okay? Not trying to brag, but I was just raised a certain way. And I just don't cuss. I don't even Baptist cuss or Bible cuss. Okay, I can't do it. And I'm thankful I was raised that way. But I've had many people try to get me to cuss, and they've always failed. One of the goals of one of the workers is to get me to cuss one of these days. They came close a few times, but they never made it. But I remember he didn't get me to cuss, but I finally said, you know what, I'm done. I was supposed to be kind of helping in his area, and I said, I'm done helping you. And I just left him alone, didn't help him anymore. So then he went to tattle on me for not helping him. And I'll never forget it because the boss came to talk to me, and he was just like, yeah, Chris is upset, and he said, you did this, and you're not helping him and all that. And I told him, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. He's like, I was just like, Tommy, really? He's the one you're tattling on today? Because he was always having conflicts with people. And I didn't get in any trouble because my boss trusted me. And we ought to be that way. We ought to be that way with wherever we do. We ought to be people that someone can trust. And if you ever want to oversee anything, if you want to be in charge of anything, if you want to be used more in your line of work or your business, you need to be trustworthy. You need to be somebody that people can count on. And if you do that and God's blessing you, your boss is going to be blessed because of you, and he's just going to want you doing more because you're profitable. But most people today, they're just not like, even Christians. Some of the sorriest people I've ever worked with are Christians. And that's a shame. It shouldn't be that way. But Joseph, he was trusted. It also says, too, in this passage that Joseph was a goodly person and well-favored. So he was somebody that was good-looking. He also had that going for him. And so in verse 7, it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me, but thee, because thou art his wife, How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And I love this because, again, the character of Joseph. And notice how Joseph recognized that while he had been put in charge of everything in the house, that his authority had limits. This is something a lot of pastors don't realize. That even though you have certain authority in the church, your authority is limited. Hey, folks, that's the way it is with all authority. Whether you're a president or a governor, your authority has limits, and you should always stay within your realm of authority. And Joseph, while his boss, like, this house is your house. You decide what's to be done because God blesses you. At the end of the day, it's mine, but you do whatever you want. But when it came to his master's wife, a wife can only be the wife of one man, and she was Potiphar's wife, and Joseph could not do that. He could not do that sin against God, but he couldn't do that sin against Potiphar. He had been put in a position of trust, and to betray that trust would have been extra wicked. And listen, adultery is a sin no matter what, but this situation would have been worse because of the level of trust that had been given to him. And we need to understand, people who commit crimes in positions of trust, they should be punished more. Pastors should get in a lot of trouble when they turn out to be perverts and child molesters and things like that. They should be in big, big trouble because people should be able to trust a pastor. Everybody knows, even the world knows, that a pastor is supposed to be a spiritual leader. He's supposed to encourage people to do good and to do right. He's expected to be godly and Christ-like in some way. And so people should be able to trust a pastor. We shouldn't trust anybody too much. Don't leave your wife alone with another man just because he's a pastor. Be careful when it comes to your kids and things. But at the end of the day, while I'm not telling you, leave your kids at my house and leave me alone with your kids, you should be able to trust me. In a perfect world, there's not going to be a problem. And I know I don't have a problem in that area, but not a lot of people thought that about their pastor, and it turned out to be false. And let me tell you something, when that kind of thing happens, these guys should be punished to the max. They get off way too easy. And same thing too with police officers. Okay, you should be able to trust a police officer. And when these guys abuse their power, when they abuse their position, I'm telling you, man, they ought to come down on them hard. It's a very wicked thing to do. Betrayal is a horrible thing. And I believe that's one of the reasons the betrayal of Judas was so bad. Not just because it was Jesus that was betrayed, even though that does make it worse. Because, if you or I get betrayed, we ask for it sometimes, but Jesus did nothing wrong. But notice in Luke 22, you don't have to turn over there, in verse 47, it says, "And while he yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them, and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss?" Now, why did he say that? Because if the fact that Judas was able to approach Jesus like that, get close to him, and kiss him, shows that he is a close friend of Jesus. Because you can't just get that close with anybody, can you? We all kind of have our bubble, don't we? And, when people invade that bubble, we all get nervous, don't we? But there's some people that are allowed to invade that bubble. My wife is allowed to invade my bubble. My kids, they can run up and, grab me and hug me and get close to me and things like that. But, not everybody can do that. Okay? Now, you all can get a little closer before I get nervous, like I said, you can come and shake hands, pat me on the back. I'm not going to be nervous or weird or anything like that. You all are able to get closer to me than a stranger can. For example, if I'm out walking the street and somebody starts getting, within a certain distance, I get a little nervous. In fact, I was just walking over to Casey's yesterday, and there was this girl, a teenage girl that was walking over there too, and she was going slow. She's kind of on her phone, and I've only got one path I can go, but I was kind of getting close. I could tell. I was like, this is probably going to make her nervous, and so I was like trying to go a different way and trying to cross the street, and it was like all of a sudden she realized I was behind her, and it was like she got freaked out because like she thought I was following her or something. And I was probably I didn't even get within 10 feet, but she was just walking in an area where there's not a lot of foot traffic. And I just happened to be going there at the same time, and it kind of made her nervous. And so we all know how, we all need distance, all right? There's always been a social distancing, even before social distancing, wasn't there? There was it wasn't 6 feet, but you weren't supposed to get too close before it was socially awkward, okay? And so Judas is able to just come right up to Jesus and kiss him. That shows of closeness there. And for Judas to use something like that to identify Jesus to the Roman soldiers so they could go and arrest him, that was dirty. That was dirty. It would have been better if he'd have been standing there with the Roman soldiers and be like, he's that guy over there. That one standing there on the left or something like that. That would have been better. But the way he did it too, and then it looks, because I guess he did it too, probably trying to look like he wasn't betraying him. Because he knows the soldiers are going to come and arrest Jesus. He can act like he's just one of the disciples there, but Jesus knew what was going on. Jesus knew he was pointing him out, betraying him. And when Jesus said that, I believe he said that with pain in his heart, to think that a close friend like that would do something that wicked. And that betrayal of Judas, that's what he's known for, betraying Jesus. And so betrayal is a horrible thing. Joseph, him taking advantage of this situation when he had been left with the amount of trust that he had been left, would have been a very wicked thing to do to his master. And Joseph, he had too much character. He would not do something like that, and he didn't do something like that. So when we allow people certain access, or when people allow certain access into their lives, we should never use that against them. And that is very hurtful when you do that. When somebody invites you to their house, okay, that shows a certain level of trust. It would be wicked for you to just go over to somebody's house. They invite you over as a friend, and then you decide, you come over to my house, and you're like taking pictures and videos and things so you can try to expose me to my enemies. You know how messed up that is? That's betrayal. I allowed you a certain level of trust, and then what'd you do? You go in my bathroom and you're taking pictures of our medicine cabinet, trying to see what pills we're taking, so you can post it on social media. That's none of your business. We don't even have a medicine cabinet. But I guess we do in the new bathroom, don't we? But there's no pills in there. But that's just dirty, isn't it? That is a dirty, dirty thing to do, and you shouldn't do that. And so, verse 10, it says, "And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within." And we do want to be careful about allowing ourselves to be in compromising situations, okay? I've heard people preach against Joseph in this part. I don't think Joseph was at any fault here. I think he wasn't expecting it. I think it just happened, and there probably wasn't anything he really could have done about it. In fact, chances are Potiphar's wife probably made the arrangements for this to happen so she could sabotage Joseph. And so, understand that, there might be times where you just end up in a compromising situation. But if you find yourself there, do what you can to get out of it, because you never know what could happen. And so it says in verse 12, "And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. And it came to pass that when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he had heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home." So this woman was so aggressive. She literally grabs a hold of him. And I love what he did there. He left the garment in her arms. It'd be like if somebody grabbed my suit and I just, took off running and left the suit in your hand. The Three Stooges used to do that all the time. When people grabbed them, they would leave their suit behind and just take off running. And every time I read this story, I think of the Three Stooges. It just shows how carnal I am. But listen, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. This is 2020, but you know what? Sometimes women lie about rape. Okay? Now, I do want to say this. we do have a story in the Bible where we have a very aggressive woman who's 100% at fault and a very godly man who is 100% innocent. However, this type of situation, I do not believe happens every day. And every preacher that falls into sin these days and does something terrible, he tries to act like he's a Joseph. And it's just not the case. Okay? First off, these guys don't even run. They always fall, and then they still want to compare themselves to Joseph. They act like every woman out there is Potiphar's wife. And listen, there's Potiphar's wives out there, but they're rare. Okay? They're really, really rare. And most of these preachers that fall into sin, they dove head first. Okay? And yes, some women do lie about rape, but it's usually the guy pursuing. And I'm sorry, I don't believe a lot of these stories these guys tell. I think a lot of them, they try to use this story, and they try to pretend they're Joseph. But folks, Joseph was an amazing man with amazing character. He's a very exceptional individual. He's somebody in the Bible. We don't see anything negative about this guy. Most men probably would not have done what Joseph did in that situation. I mean, I'd like to think I would. I'd like to think all of us would. But, we don't know. This was a very big deal that Joseph said no in this situation. And I'm sorry, these men that are getting in trouble, that are getting accused, they're not Josephs. 99 times out of 100, I don't think they're Josephs. But boy, they sure love to act like they are. And I find it revolting. And again, pastors that get busted for adultery, they should never be restored to a pulpit. I just saw a sermon clip where Cameron Giovanelli was preaching and talking about how, we can restore people, but he's like, but not to here. Talking about not being restored to the pulpit. And I'm thinking, why didn't you follow your own preaching? And even after he got busted, he still goes to be a president of another Bible college somewhere. I mean, it's amazing the hypocrisy that's out there. And all these preachers, they all think they're Josephs. But you know what? I've never been in a situation like this. I hope I never am. But this is another interesting thing, too. When I was ordained, there was a bunch of preachers that privately first went and they asked me questions. And I remember one of the things that was brought up in my ordination by one of the pastors is he said, I believe for every man of God, there's going to be a Potiphar's wife out there. The devil's got a Potiphar's wife out there. It's going to try to trip you up and try to get you to fall in sin. And they were telling me about the importance of, staying close to my wife and, being, above reproach and all that kind of thing. And I mean, they were all in like, that's right. I'm thinking, and here I am now, 40. I haven't had a Potiphar's wife. Yeah, and I hope I don't ever do. Maybe I'm just not as, well-favored as Joseph, so I don't have to worry about it. But these guys I was talking to weren't real well-favored either. And, maybe in their younger days, but I'm thinking, but I remember hearing that, and I got freaked out. I'm like, good night, I got to be fighting off the women as a pastor. I wasn't really expecting that. I think that's why a lot of these perverts go for the pulpit. They're thinking, better than a rock star, I mean, that's why a lot of guys go into that. One of the women chasing them. And I should be careful. Maybe I shouldn't have even said that because, now the devil's going to hit me. But I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it hasn't been, the Potiphar's wives haven't been coming after me. I hope they don't ever. But I get nervous when these preachers act like this is just a thing they got to deal with all the time. And I've heard preachers get up and preach that too. And you'll hear the preachers out there in these past comments, hey, amen, that's right. And they get, except like they're all like dealing with it constantly. That's what they act like. And I've always thought that was so weird. I don't get it. But we do want to be careful though, because in our culture today, the women are automatically believed. This Me Too movement is strong out there. And, in this day and age we're living in, everyone is supposed to, it is politically correct to automatically believe whatever women say. And so we need to be extra careful. You know what? We'll get made fun of like Mike Pence for not being alone with women. But you know what? I'd rather get made fun of for not allowing myself to be alone with women than to be getting accused of a bunch of perversion and having everybody believe it. Because guess what? If I get accused of anything, everyone's going to believe it. Not because of my character, not because of my history with women, not because of anything that I have ever done, but because of what I preach. Because of what I preach, everyone will believe it if I ever get accused of anything. Reason Files will have 20 videos on it. And just you're wondering when I'm going to step down as a disqualified pastor, when you all are going to quit going to a church with a disqualified pastor just because someone accused me. And I got a lot of enemies out there. They will eat it up. There's all kinds of groups out there that are trying to help IFB abuse survivors. And listen, there's been abuse in the IFB. There's people out there that have been taken advantage of, and it's horrible that happens. There have been cover-ups in the IFB. Yes, that is a real thing, and we ought to take it serious. We need to stand against it. We've got to start rejecting these popes that are going and relocating these guys and sending them all over the place, that covering these things up. Listen, anybody who ever participates in a sexual immorality cover-up should never be preaching at another meeting ever again. And the fact that people still go to something like the Preacher's Delight Conference down in Florida, it's one of the things that's wrong with the IFB. It's one of the things that's very wrong, that they keep restoring these guys that commit adultery and other sins to the pulpit. That is one of the things that is wrong with the IFB. And a part of me, I get it why the Phil kids are like, what, I've had enough of this. I'm not IFB anymore. I want to change their name. I get it to a certain extent, because it makes me nervous sometimes, because it's like if they're going to keep doing this kind of junk, it's going to get associated with us. Even though I've been in church for 40 years almost now, and I have never even been in a church or a part of a church or close to a church where that type of thing has happened. And I thank God for that. I mean, I've never even been to a church where there's been an accusation of anything. I'm thankful for that, but because we have that name, Independent Fundamental Baptist, we use that name, IFB, everybody's going to believe it. So folks, you got to, you know what? It might be a little inconvenient sometime. It might be a little weird. If you're not able to come to the church when you see I'm here, if I'm not able to go to your, if I'm never going to be alone with any of the women, but that's just the way it's got to be. You got to understand that you got to deal with it. Ladies, if there's something you need to do here at the church, you know what you can do? You can call my wife and let her know. You don't need to be calling me. You don't need to be texting me. We don't need anything looking weird. We don't need anything that could be perceived the wrong way, and you need to let her know. That way, if I need to, I can leave, because we don't need our cars here at the same time. We don't need things looking bad. Understand, because one, there is danger, there is temptation. I'm capable of falling just like anybody else, but I think we need to be more scared just about accusations. So we're going to be picky about this stuff, because this accusation, this false accusation where Joseph was 100% in the right, she was 100% in the wrong, you know what? It landed him in prison for a long time. And you know what? I'm not doing no time. Okay? I'm not going to jail. Okay? And so we're going to do everything we can to protect our testimony. I want to protect my image. And if I have haters out there, I want it to just be because of what I preach, not because of what I do. I'm fine with people hating on me because of what I preach about the homos. I'm fine with people hating on me because of some of the doctrines that we preach. And you know what? But if people are hating on me because of what I've actually done, there's no rewards for that. No rewards for that. And so look what it says in Titus 2, verse 6. Titus 2, verse 6, because there's a lot of people out there too. They want to blame. This is one of the things that irritates me. The people who act like they're standing up against the abuse and cover-ups in the IFB. Those same people always want to blame dress standards and the doctrines we preach on the perversion. Even what we preach about sexual purity, they like to blame those things on why there's perversion in the IFB church. I don't know how they connect these things, but they do. And it's because, again, at the end of the day, even a lot of these IFB survivor groups, they mainly hate us for the doctrine. That's mainly why they hate us. And so what they'll do, they'll find a preacher, an area where there is fault, and then they exploit that, and they use it to attack our doctrine. And that is out of line. That is wrong. I don't fall for that. When you are going to go and you're going to start acting like all indignant about a pastor being an adulterer, and then I see you out there supporting homos, I don't believe that you really care about sexual purity. You know what? I think you're a flaming libtard is what I think. And that you're just trying to use that because you hate what we preach about the homos. That's what I think, is you're going to go find that one bad apple out there, 1 out of 100, or I don't know what the percentage is, and you're going to use that because these people are libtards. A lot of these women, every time they're out there bashing the IFB, whenever they talk about God, it's always with a little g. Why is that? You know why? Because now they're atheists. And they really hate God. They hate what we teach, but that looks bad when you're attacking God and when you're attacking a religion. So what they do, they go and they'll find that one bad apple and they exploit that. But what they really hate us for is what we teach. Don't ever forget that. But it says in Titus 2:6, young men likewise exhort to be sober-minded, in all things showing thyself a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that he that is of the contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say of you. We need to be careful about our rhetoric. We need to be careful about our speech. I'm all for being zealous. I'm all for being passionate. I'm all for hating on sin. But you know what? We need to be careful about how we put some things. We need to be careful how we word things, because if we're not careful, people will use these things against us in a bad way. So again, if we're speaking the truth, it's one thing. But sometimes people just get a little overboard. They get it sounds like they enjoy the hate a little too much. They're a little too anxious to see somebody die. They're a little too creative in how they want that person to die. It's just like, you might want to watch that, okay? And let me tell you, there's some people out there I really don't like. But I probably shouldn't get up and talk about them, publicly like that, just in case something does happen to them. I don't want to be a suspect, So we need to have that, we need to be careful with our speech. We don't want them to have any evil thing to say of us. We've got enough working against us, just with all the challenges that are out there and all the hatred of just what God's word is. I don't need to go giving them more ammo by just saying dumb stuff. I don't need that. Again, I didn't write Leviticus 20:13. If I get in trouble for, saying that, I can't help that. If people hate me for saying there's only one way to heaven, there's nothing I can do about that. That's just the fact. That's just the facts. That's what it is. But I don't need to go overboard on things. It says in Matthew 5:11, it says, blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. We are only rewarded if the accusation is false. Cameron Giovanelli is not getting any rewards for all of the accusations thrown against him because they were true. He actually did this stuff. No, there's no reward for that. There's only judgment that comes from that. And if I get falsely accused of something, if our church is falsely accused of something, we'll be rewarded for that. But at the end of the day, God has to tell us to leap for joy when that happens, because when it happens, we don't really feel like it, do we? And do we really want to get attacked and persecuted just because we were saying dumb stuff? Or because we just were careless? We don't need that. So if we can avoid some of these things by putting some, practices and precautions in place and some safeguards, let's do it. And that will protect us from the evil that will be said about us, and it'll protect us from temptation too. So, remember these things. Keep these things in mind. It says in 1 Peter 4:14, if ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. Okay? It's okay. We get rewarded if we suffer for Christ, for righteousness. But we don't get rewarded when we suffer for evil doing. A lot of people do bad stuff they suffer for it, and then they act like they're victims. They act like they're being tested by God. They claim Romans 8:28, and it's like they get thrown in jail for robbing a bank. Well, we know that all things work together for them who love God, them who are called according to his purpose. Really, God called you to go rob that bank? Really? You love God, and yet you're violating his commandments? That doesn't apply to you, buddy. I'm sorry, that's not the way that works. You molested that kid, or you messed around with that woman that wasn't your wife, and now you're suffering for it. You're not going to be rewarded for that. You are not suffering for righteousness' sake. You're suffering for unrighteousness' sake. And there's no rewards for that. You just get to suffer and deal with it like a man. So some people are just suffering because they're bad. So verse 17, and she spake unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which he spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. Now, I can only speculate here. But, a part of me thinks there's no way Potiphar believed this story. He was just scared of his wife. There's no way he really thought Joseph did this. But at the same time, it does say his wrath was kindled. And so he might have seen this as a betrayal. I trusted this guy. He was a servant. I've let him live like a king in my house. I did all this for him. And then he turns around and goes and tries to steal my wife. So he might have believed the story, but he could have been given into his wife. Notice how she said to him, the Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us. Okay, what's the woman doing there? Blaming her husband. Okay, women blame their spouse too. Okay, men aren't the only ones that do that. And that's kind of a common tactic with the females, is to find a way to, just kind of blame the guy. And so what do we do, men, whenever we're like about to get blamed for something? Any way we can shift the blame, we're going to do it, right? Any way we can get out of trouble, we're going to do it. And so what does he do whenever she's like throwing it his way? That servant that you brought in? This is what he did. And so, yeah, man, I'm mad. Yeah, let's throw him in prison. And that's what she, because she was just angry at Joseph because she was just scorned. She was, shut down, and it bothered her. And let me tell you, what they say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And this woman showed that. Here he does the right thing, and she's willing to let him go to prison over a lie. And this is why, again, the law of God, it fixes everything. If we had a law that if you accuse someone of something falsely, then you get the punishment that they would have received. I think, rape should have the death penalty on it. So if you accuse somebody of rape and it's proven that you falsely accused, not, hey, they accused him of rape, but they couldn't prove it. No, they proved that you made it up. If you do that, then you get the death penalty. Then women aren't going to be, even if, now it's just prison, but even if they would go to prison for something like that, women aren't going to be doing that. You're not going to go to prison if we just can't prove it. Okay? And that's one of the tough things about sexual abuse. A lot of times it happened years ago, and, these predators are smart. They know how to do these things in a way where there is no proof many times. And, that's heartbreaking when that happens. And, obviously people like that should not get in trouble unless it's proved that they were lying. And I think if we did that, that would solve all the problems. But I'm not holding my breath for Congress to pass any kind of law like that. The way it's going to be like when you shoot a guy in self-defense, you automatically go to jail until they figure everything out. And pretty soon it's going to get that way. You get accused of sexual perversion, as long as it's male against female, not being a queer or anything like that. It's just going to be automatic jail until you can prove that you're innocent, which is completely unbiblical and unconstitutional, but it's heading that way. And let me tell you something, in the online world, okay, you're guilty until proven innocent. Okay, you are guilty until proven innocent. I could go out there tomorrow and I could make a fake YouTube profile and leave a comment accusing myself of something, and reason files will be all over it making videos about me being an adulterer. I shouldn't say that because some weirdo out there is going to do that. And then all these things, that's how wicked these people are. And it's sad. Another horrible thing that, I guess a group that nobody thinks to yell at, because everybody's always talking about, we got to think about the victims. We got to think about the victims. What about the victims? Well, what about those who are making false accusations, making it where nobody trusts the real victims? You know what? The real victims of sexual abuse, they should really hate those people. These women that are always out there crying rape when they weren't raped, they make it so people don't believe it because they're always out there crying wolf. They should hate them as much as anybody else. And so, that's another thing too. Because I actually care about real victims, I am disgusted and appalled by people who make stuff up and throw out false accusations. Those people should get in major trouble. And it's sad that they don't. But anyway, in verse 20, it says, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in the prison, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. And the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. There's that blessing of Abraham again. There's Joseph. He's a prisoner, and yet he's prospering as a prisoner. And now, what did that look like? I don't know if these guys, chances are, they were probably laborers, and all of a sudden now, because Joseph is in charge of things, they're getting a lot more work done. They're actually accomplishing things. And then the keeper of the prison, he just puts Joseph in charge. Again, like, hey, he's running the prison better than I am. When I was running the prison, I was beating these guys with a whip, and they weren't getting hardly any work done. Joseph somehow is able to motivate these guys. And who knows, maybe Joseph's like, hey, guys, you know what? If we work smarter, we can get a lot more done. We can have some actual free time. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what all happened, but Joseph, he obviously had a great deal of wisdom. We're going to see later what he does to help Egypt get through the 7 years of famine that was coming. He was a very wise man, and he was very good at what he did. And at the end of the day, God was just blessing him in everything that he put his hand to. And you say, well, how could God be blessing him in this situation? He's in prison. But, spoiler alert, this was necessary so he could eventually stand before the king. Were it not for Joseph spending that time in Potiphar's house, if it weren't for Joseph going to the prison, he would have never had that opportunity. That chief baker or butler, whichever one it was, would not have known, hey, there's a guy in the kingdom that can interpret dreams. Joseph wouldn't have been able to interpret that dream and to literally save Egypt and save his whole house. But God knew all this was coming. So even though there were some bad situations here and bad circumstances, God allowed Joseph to go through Potiphar's house. He allowed him to go through that time in prison, but God still blessed everything that he did. And while I'm sure, things were better for Joseph in many ways back when he was at home with his father, his time in prison probably wasn't that bad if things are prospering and things are going good. So just an amazing thing, the way God was with him. And so it's that blessing of Abraham again. So something we can learn from this, too, is that we should make the best of any situation we're in. And let me tell you, Christians, we're often the best at just pouting sometimes. We say we're not prosperity, we don't believe in the prosperity gospel and all that stuff, but yet we act like Romans 8:28 means all things are good. But it says all things work together for good. That implies there's some stuff in there that's not so good. And that is the Christian life. There's things that just aren't so good, things that are problems that we have to deal with, but we ought to make the best of it. And man, do we not need this in 2020? This is 2020, the year of broken dreams, the year of canceled events, the year of craziness, the year of tyranny, the year of everybody hating each other and choking each other. I mean, just the year of violence, an election year, tornadoes, fire tornadoes, murder hornets. What else bad's happened? Lockdowns, COVID. I mean, just all the things that happen. And hey, we still got a few months left. You think about that, but you know what? We can still make the best of it. And I think we have. I mean, I hate to say this, after all the complaining we've done, but I mean, this has still been a pretty good year for our church, hasn't it? I mean, our attendance has been good. We've got the new building. We're all supposed to be broke by now. And I know it's all got to fall apart eventually, all right? But it hasn't yet, okay? The Lord's blessing us. Things are going good, and we've just been trying to make the best, even though things have been difficult, even though, it's made soul winning more challenging this year. We haven't been able to have a lot of the bigger events like we've been planning on doing. In a lot of places, in a lot of areas, it's just not been as receptive. I just had it knocked on the door Sunday. It was kind of weird because the guy came to the door and he did this. He wanted me to step back, and then he let me talk to him and everything. But it was just people acting weird. They're acting weird, and it's made things difficult. But you try to have fun with it, and a lot of inconveniences. It's no fun being told to wear a mask everywhere you go, not getting to see anybody smile, and just playing pandemic is what it feels like sometimes. But at the end of the day, one of the problems of this pandemic is quarantine weight. These are the problems that we're having, because we all get to get quarantined in our house that has, we're housed with television and live streaming and internet and video games and food. And, these are our side effects that we're having. I put on a few pounds this year. I think part of that's from quitting Walmart too. But there was a while I wasn't able to go to the gym. But we got to make the best of these things. And if Joseph wasn't complaining, we should probably watch that. And some of our complaining, I'm not going to pick on y'all for complaining too much. Sometimes it's just therapeutic. Sometimes we do it for entertainment. It just makes you feel a little bit better. When I worked at the distribution center, we complained all the time. I complained about it. Just, it's therapeutic. I don't know. You say that's bad therapy. It probably is, but it made me feel better. And I learned that. I learned that from a job I used to have. There was a guy I was friends with, and that's just what we did, man. We got pleasure out of talking about how horrible our job was. And to listen to us talk, we were in hard bondage, just like the Egyptians in Egypt. But the thing is, we all could have quit that job at any time. But it's just what we did, and that was probably a bad habit. I did that job for 2 years, and we did that kind of thing all the time. And then now it's just kind of how I deal with stuff. I complain about it. It makes me feel better. And that's probably terrible, but old habits are hard to break. But either way, if we're miserable, if we're unhappy, it's our fault. Y'all understand that? I'd love to blame Pritzker for all my misery and all my woes, but I can't, okay? I can't really do that, and not trying to stick up for Pritzker. But if I'm miserable, it's not his fault, it's my fault. And so just because things are out of our control, it doesn't mean they're out of God's control. So we should all strive to be like Joseph. We should see ourselves as overseers of what belongs to God. Joseph showed great character in this story because while he had been put in charge of a lot, he wasn't in charge of everything. And he did the right thing in that situation. And so too many people, they're just too attached to the things of this world. And we've got to understand, there's nothing in this world that compares to the eternal rewards that are going to come. And so at the end of the day, nothing is ours, okay? Your family is not yours. Your job, your cars, your money, everything you have, it is not yours. It is God's, but God has allowed you to be overseer of these things. And you need to recognize the fact these things belong to God. I should not do anything with them that he would not want me doing with them. And if we would have that attitude and we would do great things with what belongs to God, if we would increase what belongs to God and perform his will with what belongs to him, you know what he's going to do? He's going to entrust us with more. And who doesn't want more? Okay, we're also Americans. We want more of everything. We want super duper size, French fries. We want, 62-ounce Cokes. We want 95-inch TVs. That's kind of how we are as Americans. Well, maybe we could get more from God if we would have that attitude that it's his. Let's use it. Let's multiply it. It's not mine. I'm just an overseer. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it not being mine and just be in charge of it. If you lived in a multi-million-dollar mansion and you wanted to make me overseer of it and I got to live in there like it was my house, I wouldn't care that I didn't own it. I wouldn't care that it wasn't my name on the deed. It should be cool I got to live there. And you know what? The Lord has given me a great wife. He's given me 7, almost 8 now, wonderful children. And at the end of the day, they're not mine, they're his, but I get to enjoy them. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And so I need to make sure I don't do anything with them, though, he wouldn't want me doing. That's against his will. And that needs to be our attitude. So great lessons from Joseph. So let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for your word. We thank you for this wonderful example of Joseph that we see in your word. I pray you'll help us to be like him. Help us to realize everything we have belongs to you, that we're just overseers of it. And I pray we'll use what you've given us according to your will and for your honor and glory. In your name we pray. Amen.